Hey,
everyone.
Let us know if you can hear us in the comments. I am going to actually head to make sure we can see the comments. We are here around the glass table with Chessa, Molly, and Emma, and I, Spencer. Me, Spencer. So as I do that, guys, give me a second here to make sure everything is streaming wise is going okay. So how's everybody?
angry.
And
I
yeah,
think everybody's angry.
Dehydrated.
yeah. Well, it is a time where of unrest, of um, anger is a good word. Um, I know if you guys missed us, I hope you didn't miss us. Last Saturday, we actually had an hour or so hour long panel of uh, with Simon the Zealot, Matthew McMillan, as well as Ramona. I always forget her last name. Ramona, don't give me. I think it's Gil, as well as myself, Emma, and Molly, where we also went over some of the footage and had a candlelight visual, online candlelight visual for George Floyd. So today we're going to kick off something a little bit more differently because, as with all types of activism, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's Extra Hope Witness activism, whether it's activism. Uh, and it comes in so many different forms. It requires money, right, Chester? Some type of fundraising, some type of backings, some type of support. And unfortunately, we're not in a position because I think I've talked about bounce this idea off of people I've talked to that I've wanted to start can drives and clothing drives, just among extra Jehovah Witnesses. But, with the COVID scare, it's kind of not feasible because a lot of the donation centers around us are closed and won't be open even after the quarantine because it's just those are personal items. As a matter of fact, some stores are not even taking clothing back. Like you have to really make sure that you buy what you want to buy. So you have to. The other way that we can give is monetarily.
Right. And I want to start like a shelter for two reasons. And I probably won't see either of them become real in my lifetime because, well, first of all, I'm not paid enough to do that and save enough money to get it built. But hey, I have this vision that I would create two shelters, one for abuse victims to just get out of their situation, and one for queer kids who are thrown out for being queer, which is a very common occurrence, sadly.
I know, and all of us are doing what we can in different ways. I know, I personally, I tried to, after leaving Christianity and leaving the church, before I left the church, I was involved in homeless drives and helping inner city children how to read. Churches are a good way to kind of funnel charitable acts. Then we have the things that we do individually online. I know Emma has a group for Extra Hope Witness for homeless, and I'm sorry, it's something else. Homeless and something else, Emma.
Homeless employment and I can't remember. I changed the name of it recently, but it's just for ex-JWs who need help with jobs, somewhere to live, and then those that can offer that as well.
And we're going to actually have a show, I believe it's next month or maybe upcoming, about help, what you can do to empower yourself when you need help, and how you can get help from others if you need it, because it's out there and the resources are there. And a lot of times it costs you little to nothing. As a matter of fact, it should cost you nothing if in fact this is a legit place trying to help you out. But there are a lot of free resources out there to help extra hope witnesses and people who are displaced. And what we're going to be talking about today is some of the ways that you can actually do that. I know, Chester, you have had some success with the Facebook fundraisers. I know you do other things, but I've actually had Facebook. You can actually see a ticker so everybody can actually see it going. So how's that going?
I do like that. Okay, so what I kind of wanted to get into today is all of us are here because we're interested in activism, or we have been motivated to speak up about something in our lives, because that's generally what makes you follow channels like the Glass Table and Like Us Ladies. And we're all in a community together. So that's the reason why most of us are here, if it's not for an outside reason. And all of us are dedicating our time. Most of us have been home more lately because of the COVID issues. Most of us have been quarantined. So we have been working on a lot of things from home. And while everything else has been shut down, obviously a lot has been happening in our communities around the world, including these recent protests. And I think it's really, really important for anybody who feels like they are well informed in what is going on to make sure and to really do your diligence and research, because this is a very serious movement that is happening right now. In our history, you look back, you see the civil rights movements in the 60s. You go back beyond that, you can see other movements where people of oppression rose up and said, I'm not going to take this anymore. And this is one of those points in history. So all of us are here because we want to support. All of us want to make a difference. But a lot of us are moms at home with our kids. And it's difficult to take our children somewhere where they could be harmed. We've seen police macing children when they take them to this protest. And at the same time, there's people like us that want to make a difference. So how can we protect our children, but at the same time support? So we try to manage our time and speak up online and maybe organize online stuff like we're doing here today. But then that takes away from our families. You know, that takes away from our jobs. We have to coordinate it with the things that we're doing. Everybody's shifting back into going back to work now. We're able to do less. So what's a way that we can support the people who are out there who continue to use their time and all of their resources to do this stuff, like the protesters that we have around the world peacefully protesting? I've had a lot of people saying, how can you support protesters? They are rioting and looting. That is not true. Peaceful protesters are protesting. Looters are looting. Rioters are rioting. And there's a difference between opportunists who go somewhere for their own personal agendas or personal gain to somewhere like this, where real change is happening, where real emotion and real feeling and anger, righteous anger, is present, and people are trying to convey that in a peaceful manner and say, I'm not going to take this anymore. You're going to have people who come into that for themselves. Okay, but that does not apply to everybody. It doesn't even apply to many, honestly, in comparison to the good people out there who are risking their lives for this stuff. So this is a serious movement. You need to think about it. You need to research as much as you can. But we also need to support the people who have jeopardized themselves, who have put themselves at risk, who have been arrested simply for refusing to be oppressed or to stand up for those who refuse to be oppressed and put themselves on the line. We've been watching live feeds from home, right? You watch people out there, okay? And they are risking so much being there because they're saying, we don't want authoritarianism in our government. We want the ability to be able to prosecute officers, whether they harm someone who's black, white, brown, yellow, red, it doesn't matter. Every single human being on this planet deserves the right to prosecute the person that abuses them. It should not matter if it's law enforcement. It should not matter if it was a government order. They deserve to be held accountable. And a lot of people know us as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. If you guys don't know what that is, it's a lot. Check out JW Facts. Just type that into Google and it will take you to everything you need to know if you want to learn more about what we've been through. But basically, to put it very nicely, we've been brainwashed. We said, what in the heck is going on here? A lot of human rights abuse has happened in our personal lives. We've been oppressed in different ways, whether it was because of our skin color or because of something else. But all of us know what it's like to go through finding out that everything you was a lie and waking up to it and trying to find ways to activate yourself and to activate the people around you to make this stop. Because we're saying no to that and we're holding them accountable. So we're used to holding people accountable, I guess. And we want to make sure everybody in our communities can protected. And a lot of us put kids first. A lot of us have kids' rights, especially children's rights in mind. with the activism that we do on top of countering indoctrination, undue influence in the media, rights to free speech. We have a lot of similar goals outside of our personal XJW activism. And all of us are here today because we do support Black Lives Matter. So I know you guys have been involved personally. Can you tell me some of the ways that you have seen things going, or how is this making you feel right now in this moment?
I think for me, to begin with, well, Bella is has something to say, I guess. I'm sorry. Yeah. Anyway, for me, I was telling the girls that I closed myself off from it because I literally just came off of the guy being, the vigilantes or the wannabe Batmans that jumped on the guy, the jogging guy. Okay, like so I was literally just reeling off of that, and I personally, after Eric Garner, I think his name was, made a personal commitment that I would not watch another police brutality tape. I grew up from an era where I remember Rodney King. I remember the riots then, and I'm also in a city where we're famous for the '60s riot here, a race riot here, which almost burned Detroit to the ground. So I don't want to call it police brutality fatigue, but but you get desensitized at a certain point because it happens so often. So I just wanted to clarify that the fact that I didn't want to see another tape, it was not because I'm just didn't want to see another tape, or I was indifferent, or didn't want to understand. It's just that it takes an emotional toll on you, especially if you are a mother of a Black son or a wife of a Black man. You are in a position where you feel like you are sending your kids out to the line of fire every day, and then you have a child. Like my child is kind of like his mama and bulk at authority a little bit, and you have to kind of tell them how doing that could actually lead your life. And not saying that the people who were in the position where they were being brutalized by the police were bulking authority, because following authority can also lose your life. It's just that these officers feel like it comes from a system of cronyism within the police force, and the systemic racism. Um, the police force will also enforce in our country to be slave catchers. So they have a history of slave catching and even going out to lynchings to catch Black people to bring them to lynchings, so that white people could observe, and they would even bring their children when cops would lynch Black people on trees, and then the press would take pictures, and people would order pictures later for them albums. I actually mentioned that on our program last Saturday, because there was a exhibit here called Without Sanctuary, and it exhibited the lynching in America. And I don't even talk about it because it was actually, although it was very enlightening, it was very traumatizing. I mean, you can read this stuff, but to know that hear these people's stories, the people that are still alive, and to see the stories through their pictures. So to make a long story short, the Black people and the cops have had a sordid history, um, a history of distrust, especially if they were kidnapping you and separating you from your children or lynching you. Okay, a history of you know, you know, being abused and misused. And right in the height before the Rodney King riots, it was Ice Cube and NWA saying "fuck the police," trying to bring awareness to police brutality in the '90s in LA. So again, people see these images and they see, like, I had a person today say that the looters were 90% Black. I don't know how in the world you could have got that figure, what footage you would have seen, what figures, I mean, is this a Pew research? I mean, where are you getting this information from? However, this is, when you think about it, some of the images that you see on certain channels looks like out of the 60s, when blacks were being hosed down and by fire hoses, or police dogs were sick on the people that were protesting, the blacks that were protesting then. So it's a very complicated, a very violent, and a very racist history that blacks have with the cops. So not only if we have to endure racism, but it's also the cronyism of cops that don't get held accountable because their grandfather worked for the force, or their brother worked for the force. And as far as Black Lives Matter, I have to say it's a very new movement for me, because I was an ex-Jehovah Witness activist, and that was pretty much, besides that and secularism, activism for secularism, that's pretty much all I ever really did. However, I do believe that Black Lives Matter is, as I was reading earlier, something Emma had from Etsy. I do believe that there are the civil rights movement of our time. No organization is perfect, you know. No organization is perfect. No group of people isn't perfect, but I believe the cause is worth fighting for. You know, you don't have to necessarily be associated with Black Lives Matter, the actual group, to believe that Black Lives Matter. So that's pretty much my take on it. And then, Chessa, I just been avoiding a lot of the visceral responses. I'm trying to avoiding certain channels, avoiding certain news, because the news has a tendency to sensationalize this as well, because every corporate media, this is all money for them. So I kind of feel like on that end, it's no different than when the whites would go and purchase the pictures from the news organizations. If you're going to replay this man being with his foot on his neck every single hour on the hour. So you kind of feel torn. It's traumatizing to see this over and over again. And it doesn't look like it's going to let up anytime soon. And unfortunately, the riots, I heard somebody say, well, the riots erase everything that you were fighting for. No. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. The riots can be wrong, and the racist cop who killed that guy can also be wrong. You don't have to choose one or the other. So that's me. Just reeling from our episode on Saturday.
And can I just? Oh, sorry, Tessa.
Yes. No, go ahead.
And can I just say, I was in an abusive relationship. He did not fucking care that I was begging and pleading for him to stop assaulting me or stop hurting me. What he cared about was me jumping, propping myself up the windowsill, and kicking him in the chest. That's what he cared about. And me getting very loud, very obnoxious, and very violent in retaliation. That's what made him stop. And that's how I got out of that. So I get it. Kumbaya, very beautiful, nice, fair, okay, whatever. But it's not working. They tried that, and your president called Kaepernick a son of a bitch for fucking kneeling. How much more peaceful can you get? You cannot. And yeah, you know what? Hey, Angela. You know what? Especially in the US, all they care about is capital. Capital, 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 capital. Ruin the capital, grab their attention. So if, businesses need to burn down for human beings to get decent, basic human rights, let the motherfuckers burn.
I'll have to, and on that note, Molly, I just like to also say, I love the way Molly. I also say, it is not violent to destroy a building. I think we have really skewed what human life is versus property. Burning buildings is not violence. Actually hurting people is. Okay, so there are some instances. You know, people want to plaster these newspapers. There are instances of people being hurt, but there are rioters, and then there are protesters, and then there are rioters.
Right, and about that, I have been trying to not look at the footage but follow the numbers, if you may. Like I have been trying to keep up with details of what's going on, and you know, first off, because, well, I have Black and Muslim friends in America, so I you know, I want them to be safe and sound, and I don't want them to be hurt, and I want them to not be oppressed. I want them to be happy. I want them to have the same opportunities as I would have if I ever moved there. I want them to have the same chances to get where they want to get in life. And you know, we discussed this on Saturday, that in Minneapolis, the first brick was thrown by a white cop who was placed there undercover to start riots. And I watched a video just this morning before work by Suris the Skeptic. It's his latest video, so you can watch it. I think it's titled "Officer, I Cannot Breathe," for the obvious reason. And he says that multiple friends of his who live in like New York, Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, you know, big cities, that they all see random piles of bricks where they are not supposed to. There are no constructions going on. There's not much going on, but there's random bricks in front of expensive shops and stuff. So what's that about? Why are there random piles of bricks where they are not supposed to? So, you know, sometimes, and they use it. They use baits all the time. I read multiple news articles where young Black or brown or Latino teens got arrested for robbing a bait, um, like a bait storage van. Like police officers parked the van, left it open with the sneakers, and just sat back and waited for someone to steal it. And obviously, where did they park? In the middle of like MacArthur Park, or in the middle of Compton, middle of Tenderloin, middle of fucking Hell's Kitchen. Like, don't be ridiculous now. That's that's not justice. That's not police work. That's instigating violence.
I remember that. It was
Right.
setting people up, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just crazy. And even in Hungary, I have ex-Muslim friends who live in Hungary because they are medical students and they came to learn here. And one of them was, you know, having to do stuff around town, and his business took him outside of his sphere of knowledge. And, you know, he wound up having to go to a part of town that he didn't know well. So he saw 3 cops, and he walked up to them and asked them, "Where's the closest bus stop? I'm lost, officer." And first of all, he doesn't really have an accent because he learned English from Americans. And he doesn't really look Middle Eastern either. He's from Iran. He doesn't look Middle Eastern. He doesn't have the turban. He has a hook nose and a frizzy hair. Basically, that's what gives away that he might not be white, or not fully white. And they dragged him to the police station and held him overnight for asking where the next bus stop is. What's that about? So it's a universal thing. And one of the guys under Spencer's post was like, Black people are on welfare more often. Guess what? Hungary has its own sort of Black people. They are called Romani or Gypsies. And guess what? They are more often on welfare for one simple reason. Because they are forced, or they were and still are forced to live in the cheapest, most rural, most uneducated parts of the country, and they are not hired. They are not hired because they have they speak with an accent, because they use throwaway like Romani words, and because they look different, and they are not being hired properly. They cannot get access to the same education I can, because most of them simply don't have the means to come into town and get higher education or get high school education. Most of them get pregnant at like 15 because they cannot support themselves. And that's why they have a higher prison population. That's why they require more government support, even though they are like 10 to 15% of our population. And that's the same with, I guess that's the same with POC in America.
So I have a lot of people from overseas who actually contact me and say, hey, first of all, are you alive? Are you okay? And B, what in the hell is going on here? Because every different country has their own forms of oppression and people who are oppressed. This is by no means the only country that oppresses people. But that's kind of the point here. It's not that only, hold on one second. Hey, baby.
Yeah.
Hey, Mama's talking. Okay. Here. Hold on. You guys go ahead and take over. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about I watched like 3 days of the riots on that lady's Facebook that we used the live coverage from. And come to the curfew, she was like, right, that's it, I'm off, I'm going. And then you've seen the numbers like really diminished. So it was only like a few that were sticking around, knowing that after the curfew, the police are going to confront them, and then they've got an excuse to throw the tear gas back and confront the police back. So people need to concentrate on that fact that most of the protests were peaceful. It was only a few that stuck around to do the conflict, but people are focusing on it was a riot.
Right, and can I also say that I've seen statistics. Pumpkin, please don't step on my keyboard. Thank you. Oh my God, sorry. So I've also seen statistics that, you know, these riots. Oh my girl, I'm tired. I haven't slept in like 2 nights, y'all. So if I speak like a stupid person, it's insomnia talking. So anyway, stop drinking lemonade. There you go. And basically, what I heard is, you know, these protests need to be organized, arranged, and have a schedule, and that's public. Duh, because you want people to see it and find it and go there. But some some people who were actually there at the protest report that they see a shitload of out-of-state cars, out-of-state attendees, and then those out-of-state attendees start smashing shit and acting opportunistic. They try to use the crowd, the panic, the anger, the frustration to blend in and then just loot and riot and stuff. And you know what was a riot? The Boston Tea Party was a riot. They burned them ships down. They tossed property out. If your white people don't have an issue with the fucking Boston Tea Party, please keep your all lives matter to your fucking selves.
Molly ain't playing with y'all. No, I'm playing. And on that note, see her cup.
Sorry. The thing that I was going to say was you look back at history and you look at people who have been oppressed. You look at the Jews in the Holocaust. I know there are Holocaust deniers out there. When I found that out, my jaw dropped to the floor that people could actually deny such a thing. But those kinds of people exist. But you look at the Nanking Massacre, when the Japanese went into Nanking, China, and massacred those people. One of the worst, most gruesome things, acts of war in history, human rights abuses in history. And the Japanese still to this day don't really acknowledge what happened. You see that throughout our history with different civilizations, different times people have been oppressing people since humankind popped out of wherever it popped out of. But the point is, right now, it's happening. Right now, people are standing up because there has been human rights abuses towards them. There
Right.
has been white supremacy in our government. It does exist. And it's the same as when, and why do you think we bring up the Nazis so much? Everybody's always like, oh, you guys always bring up the Nazis. That's bullshit. I've seen more Nazis in the past 5 years than I watched on all the Indiana Jones shows when I was growing up as a kid. Like, you thought that was history, right? You thought that was gone. You thought everybody around the world agreed that that was wrong, that that was terrible to do to another person, to a group of people. We all unanimously decided that this was a bad idea. And now look at what's happening. I know that it's comfortable to live in ignorance. I know it's comfortable to live in that bubble because it's not happening to you. So you feel like you don't have to acknowledge it. I know what that's like. And I'm a sex abuse survivor. All right. I've had things happen to me. All of us sitting here today have had people treat us in a way that was abusive. You know what it's like watching right now. Most of us in our life have been abused in some way. Doesn't have to be all the same. We have people who oppress us. We have people who have taken advantage of us, who have taken our dignity away. The only thing that is happening with this movement right now, when I say Black Lives Matter, that does not take away from my dignity. When I acknowledge white oppression, that does not take away from my self-worth. Far from it. If you cannot acknowledge what's really happening, if you're too afraid to go outside of your comfort zone and really understand the violence that is occurring right now to people of color, then you are living purposefully in ignorance to protect yourself. I just told somebody that in the comments when I came on here, before I came on the show, and he fired back, what do you mean living in your ego? How dare you say that to me? I've been through this, I've been through that, I've been through this, I've been through that. Listen, everybody around the planet, humankind, we are all experiencing this life together. We all hurt together. If you cut us, we bleed the same blood. Everybody knows that. That's not what this is about. It's not saying that only everybody loots but Black people. It's not saying only Black people loot. That's not the argument here. The argument is that racial oppression has been happening to African Americans for over 400 freaking years. And I can't tell you how many peaceful protests I have seen in my lifetime. I have read about. They had American Girl books that I used to get when I was a kid with little girls of color, and I would read about their lives when they would walk by and see people lynched in the trees. And I read about Billie Holiday and how she put herself out there as a performer back when women of color were heavily discriminated and overly sexualized in an industry that took advantage of and raped them just as much as everybody else in the world did. She lived in a time of a nightmare, and she still sang Strange Fruit. And if you want to talk about somebody being triggered, she was triggered every single time she sang that song. Every single time she sang that song, she went through the horror of being a woman of color, of seeing the things that she had seen happen to her family, her friends, her community. And people have witnessed that for centuries now. And they have peacefully protested for centuries. You accuse Black people of violence. You accuse Black people of drug use. Everybody around the world, regardless of their skin color, has the capacity for violence, has the capacity for addiction. That is not the argument here. The fact is,
I just want
African American communities to incarcerate them more than driving into a city, on a white suburban neighborhood. There would be the same people that would come and check that stuff out and get incarcerated. Sure. There's people who live in mansions who do more egregious shit than anybody does in some of the slums that I've seen. Like, I've seen rich white people do crazy stuff because my family used to be rich white people. Like, I have witnessed the other side of this coin. And if you don't think white privilege exists, go to Asia, because white men in Asia are treated like freaking kings. Freaking kings. They can do whatever they want. They have immunity. They have more than political immunity. They have white immunity for most of Asia. So there is white privilege. It does exist. And if you, okay, so one more thing, and then so I am a sex abuse survivor. When I did the Brooklyn protest that was on the Oxygen Network, I worked with someone who was a BLM activist and who was a dear friend of mine. We parted ways for different reasons, but he did teach me a lot. I learned a lot from him about my privilege, because I always thought growing up, because I recognized the civil rights movement, because I had Black friends, because I cared about Black people, loved Black people, that I did not have privilege, that we were all the same, but that wasn't true. And when I used to talk to him and he would say, okay, so this happened to you, that's awful, I'm so sorry. Now imagine being Black. It adds another layer onto whatever trauma you're going through, okay? And if you want to say that the media is over sensationalizing this, that, oh, well, you know, everybody can be brutalized by the cops, that's true, absolutely, that's totally true. Everybody can be, all right? But they're going to Black neighborhoods first. They're taking out their aggression on Black neighborhoods. The Reagan administration created crack cocaine. The government created crack cocaine, one of the most addictive, destroying, destructive substances on this planet for people to take and ingest into their bodies. And then they taught African American drug dealers how to make it and gave it into their communities. And they spread that like wildfire and killed how many people? The government's responsible for that. All right? So if you don't think the white supremacy exists, or that people of color have not been subjugated and oppressed by our own government, then you don't know history. You don't know shit. And it's time you fucking recognize and learn a goddamn thing. And maybe you should keep your mouth shut.
And I just want to say that all lives, and go ahead, Pastor Chester. You got me want to, right? Strange fruit. Wow, I hadn't heard that in such a long time. And that has so much pain and so much history. It's so rich, just that song and just the time that it was taken out of. And yeah, I hadn't heard that for a while. But when people say all lives matter, people want to know, well, why is that so annoying? I think we kind of touched on it on our last program, but all lives matter is not saying only my life matters or only Black lives matter. I think Matt put it really good, really great last week. That when you say Black lives matter, you're just talking about the subject of police brutality here in America, and Black lives not being mattering, you know, as a rule here in America, from slavery to Jim Crow to segregation to now this era of police brutality, even though it has always been, but a form of racism that we're seeing plastered all over the news. It's not saying that only Black lives matter. I think when people of non-color hear that, they say, "Oh, well, why all my life matters too." Matt gave an example of having a fundraiser for cancer, right? And you're raising money for cancer, and then somebody came in there and you're talking about cancer, you're raising money, and somebody came, okay, well, what about AIDS? Oh, what about diabetes? How out of place and out of context would that be? Of course, AIDS matter. Of course, diabetes matters. But we're talking about cancer today. So the subject is Black lives, police brutality. To come in and say, well, all lives matter is your way of really pretty much telling Black people to shut up about their suffering. And that's how it's being taken. So all lives has always mattered. Of course, all lives matter. But again, the subject is Black lives.
Mm-hmm.
I've said that so many times to people today. Like, I keep saying to them, all lives should matter.
Yeah.
But if they did, there wouldn't be a need for the Black Lives Matter movement. There is, because of a reason. And do you know, people have been leaving my XJW group today because I am allowing people in the group to post about Black Lives Matter. I had people inboxing me saying this should not be in this group. Can you sort it out? Otherwise, I'm leaving the group. And she said she's removing herself. I said, remove yourself then. Because at the end of the day, we have Black XJWs. It's supposed to be a non-racist religion, but I found out afterwards that a lot of them are. Certain Black people weren't allowed to give talks in certain congregations. Now, I was shocked to find that out. So for people to be that offended by Black people in my group wanting to find support, speak to other Black members about it, but to me, that's just disgusting that they like this shouldn't be in this group.
Right. I have to say, though, Emma, that your group has been a group that is very supportive, because there have been groups when stuff like this have been posted, they rip the post down and they kick persons of color out of the groups. Now, I'm not gonna name no names, but if you've been in some of these groups, you already know who I'm talking about. And if you're some of the men's on this line, you know who you are. When Black people talk about their suffering. So I just thank you, Emma, for allowing a place, because Black ex-Jehovah Witnesses, we also have a Black racist, white supremacist type, I won't say white supremacist, but systematic racism even within our religion. I mean, so of course that's part of our history still. And it's part of your history. You're Jehovah's Witnesses too. I mean, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses too. It's a part of our history. It's not just Black ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, we're ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. The Watchtower didn't just oppress Black people, it oppresses all of us in different ways.
Yeah.
And can I just say, if you think that white people are not treated differently, I told you the story about how my father got dragged to the police station for asking where the bus is. Well, then that's my white ass native Hungarian mother who smuggled all kinds of alcohol, all kinds of counterfeit shit in the country for as long as I can remember. She was so well known in Ukraine and Romania that they didn't let her go through the border. So she did some serious shit to get 2 countries to ban her from entering, right? And guess what didn't happen to her? She did not ever get dragged to the police station vehemently and in an aggressive manner. Whenever she was called on the police, she was handed a little pretty paper, and then they came and picked her up. And then once her hearing was done, boom. How's that fair? And then there's this 21-year-old med student who asks you where the bus stop is, and just because he has frizzy hair and a hook nose, you drag him. Like they basically, they didn't even allow him to ID himself. They were like, get in the car. He started he started a phone call, and I answered, and I was like, whoa, the fuck. Like, they were so aggressive with him, and they didn't even say a word to him in English. Like, I get it, we live in Hungary, but if you live in I'm not gonna name my city, but we're a university town. We have a lot of international students. Official business should be in at least Hungarian, English, and German if you're in this country, because German and English are very highly used languages. But that's beyond the point. But you see, my mother ran a whole smuggling ring, and she was never treated violently. She was never treated in a berated manner. She was never dragged to the police. She was called to the police. But even if she didn't show, they didn't come busting down our door and shooting her ass.
And then here's the thing. People think it's just about this one person. It's always about this one person, isn't it? Emma made a collage of she had a collage of all of the victims of police brutality who have lost their lives for various reasons. I know what triggered me to think of that, because one guy was just eating ice cream, like minding his own business when the cops came in, or Eric Garner was selling loose cigarettes and it lost his life and couldn't breathe, or Malice Green here in I remember Malice Green. Malice Green wasn't on that image, but Malice Green here in Detroit got beat down by the cops, and it was riots here. So, and not riots, it was protests. There is a difference, people. You get conditioned because you're hearing people say it. But anyway, so we have about 15 minutes left in our stream, and we spent a lot of our time focusing on where the focus is right now. Everybody's talking about this. However, Chessa, outside of the Black Lives Matter movement, Chessa wants to talk about, or wants to bring to our attention, that we have a couple PIMOs who are in need of assistance as well. And I actually wanted to take this opportunity to say that TGT, I mentioned it on our last broadcast, we're still working on putting the Patreon where it's public, and we'll have more information about tiers and that sort of thing. We're still working all the details. But TGT, in order to support our efforts in activism and the streaming application that we use for our platform, have decided to get a Patreon. And we want to reiterate that our Patreon is not like other Patreons that you may have seen, because our activism episodes, all of our activism, will always be absolutely free. We will not require that you look to view special activism episodes. So I know that there are other Extra Hope Witness Patreons that are like that, but ours will not be that way. We have extra content, so we're going to work extra hard for your business, outside of and we kind of heard from you guys already. We put out a poll in 2 different spots.
Do you mind running through the list of what we will have there? So what we
Sure.
will
Do you
have
have it
there?
up handy?
Yeah, I have.
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
what we will have there
Well,
is
remember,
R-rated.
it's 2 different lists. Remember, it's
Yeah,
one.
I have both of them.
Okay, good.
Up here. So
Okay.
what we have is R-rated specials, such as talking about how Watchtower treats sex or sexuality. For example, we are discussing that at the moment. That's why I said that, not because anything more. And then we have recipes and cooking. We have playing with makeup, just random makeup looks that we want to try. Unboxings. We have vlogs and personal chats, just random pop-ups. We either of us can just come on Patreon and say, hey, what you want to chat about, and have a half hour just impromptu conversation when we have the time and the want. What we also planned is movie, book, and art reviews. What we also planned was sharing our own art, especially Spence and myself. We plan on sharing our writing there. Especially, I'm a creative writer, as well as I sometimes spam on the TGT page and write a little something for activism. What else? We plan like
Pretty much covered. I think the top ones that you guys picked, our audience picked, was the Rated R Roundtable. So some of y'all nasty. That's good to know. Some of y'all like mature stuff and sex and stuff. So look, that's all good. That's why we're gonna keep it there, because and that's another thing in Patreon, because we're not monetized. So it's not like we're trying to, not saying that we don't want to be monetized. I won't say that, but at the same time, we have a little bit more leeway than other channels to actually with our content at the moment, because we can specifically craft it for mature audiences. And even though we say mature things a lot of the times on the show, we plan to be a little bit, let our hair down a little bit and allow you to let your hair down a little bit, because we are all adults here. Also with the cooking and all this other kind of stuff, that was the highly rated one. And you guys really wanted book reviews and movie reviews. So we're going to have to get into that. We actually, right now, if you just, before TGT get up and running, this is a shameless plug, Duck and Religion, we're doing a Path episode. Me, Molly are the two. I think we're the only two TGT members on that panel. So you might get a sneak peek at in Patreon of the Path episodes that we're doing to compare the Myers cult, which is a very fictionalized cult, comparing that with the Jehovah's Witnesses and the similarities and the differences there. We've been having a lot of fun with that, and that is going to drop on June 9th. So we are getting together some content that we feel like you will enjoy. Thank you for your feedback. Again, all of our activism episodes dealing with Jehovah's Witnesses and ex Jehovah's Witness content, we will never make you pay for. That would always be on our YouTube and our Facebook platform. And we're also going streaming to LinkedIn and Periscope soon, pretty soon. So we're trying to broaden our scope here a little bit. So now, Chessa and I had a chance to. This is not to brag or anything, just to let you know some of the things that we're doing behind the scenes. Had a chance to help a PIMO that was in need, and dire need, actually, far beyond financial assistance, because he needed assistance with helping him draft a letter, because he was in a situation where he was being found out by the elders. And you would think, okay, well, why does that take money? Well, he was displaced. He couldn't go back home. He was actually being threatened over this. So those are situations you have to keep in mind too when we're fundraising. Now, Chestnut and I were able to get the money to him personally, but at the same time, we all shoulder the responsibility, and we're a community here. So, Chestnut, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your fundraising efforts there and what we have to look forward to? Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, there we go. Sorry. I know that was a long segue around the corner to get to you, Chessa, but.
Here's some name a few BLM or bailout funds that you can contribute to. We looked up a few before the broadcast, and one I personally work with. There's the Nashville Community Bail Fund. I can drop the links to that in the comments after the broadcast. Louisville Community Bail Fund. Louisville has had a lot of intense combative situations with their protests over the last several days. People have been shot. So helping people to be able to get out of jail for being present at that protest, I'm sure it's not a very comfortable experience for them. So if you can send money their way, that would be great. And then Reparations Roundtable is a personal organization that I've worked with before. I've referred women of color there in my area when they were having difficulties. Maybe they couldn't afford rent, or their kids needed food, or they needed to find a place to stay, or they were in an abusive relationship and they needed immediate assistance. Kentucky does not do the best at providing assistance for people of color, naturally. So the Reparations Roundtable has done a fantastic job of taking care of my friends. I'm very, very indebted to them. I always recommend them whenever someone's looking to help out people of color. So I will leave the link to that in the comments. But basically, that's what we have kind of taken and wanted to start here at home within our ex-Jehovah's Witness community, and with other projects that we're doing, because I cannot tell you how many people I've had personally message me. Emma's had message her. Molly and Spencer have had message them, who have been displaced by coronavirus, or who were displaced before this or during this for being Jehovah's Witnesses and being found out for a sin that they committed, and so the elders will disfellowship them and they will lose their families. Some people get kicked out of their homes. Other times they just aren't wanting to be witnesses anymore. They are researching material that is not sanctioned by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Association, and they get found out and accused of apostasy. They actually go through being removed from the congregation. So especially right now, if you are a person of color who is a Jehovah's Witness and this happens to you, and you have your entire community and resources and funds cut off from you, you're in more dire straits. It adds another layer on top of the trauma that you are experiencing. So that's what we're acknowledging when we say Black Lives Matter. We're not saying that just Black people are oppressed or traumatized. We all go through it, but this is a added and very significant and violent layer to what people of color have to go through on top of everything everyone else does because of the color of their skin. That's all this is saying. This is all that's acknowledging. So we are wanting to find ways to help these people. It's really hard to have someone contact you that's in an abusive situation and you try to refer them to government services, but those take very, very long time most of the time. And especially in the cases of where there is child abuse in a home, it is very difficult to have DCFS or child services actually remove a child from the home permanently. Usually they go right back into that abusive environment. Usually there's not a place for a woman with children to go where she feels safe, where she feels like she can have a good night's rest and her children will be safe when she's leaving an abusive situation. So those are things that we try to dedicate our time to behind the scenes. That's why I haven't produced as many videos lately, is because when this whole thing happens, a lot of people have been in need. So we have, we helped the PIMO previously, but he's still actually going through that situation where he's in a very dangerous environment. He doesn't have housing, permanent housing. He was living with family and now he has been kicked out and he is not in a good area. So we're trying to find more funding for him. We're also trying to find funding for another PIMO, as well as someone who is not an ex-Jehovah's Witness, but that I know who is going through not having any money for her bills, terrified young woman, just got a lease on a car with someone. They're not paying that now. She's worried that she won't have food tomorrow. She has not been able to get government assistance. And I have helped her in other ways. Like if anybody is in need like that, you can call 211 if you're here in the United States, and they will give you the resources in your area that you live in that can help you kind of get help from different charities, different churches, government assistance in certain areas if you can't pay your electric bill or things like that. I think all of us, because of the coronavirus pandemic, have kind of been reintroduced to some of those resources. But it takes time to really learn how to work the system that way. And by work the system, I mean get help in a serious crisis situation, which a lot of us have been thrown into with this pandemic, but even more people are being thrown into now over the civil rights movement that is occurring alongside that. So we're trying to help as many people as we can. And the reason why we bring up funding is because that is something you can do if you can't contribute another way. Same as the protests. If you can't be there, I have a man who commented on one of my posts the other day that he wanted to go to a protest, but his wife had MS and he had to stay there and be her caregiver. And he was too afraid that if he went, he'd compromise himself and potentially catch the virus and bring it home to her, or he could be harmed or put into jail and he wouldn't be able to take care of her. So all of us have different circumstances. Some of us are able to attend these protests, are able to show up for what we believe in and exercise our freedom of speech. Others of us are in situations where it would endanger our families. So whether you are willing and able to donate to helping the PIMOs that we have and need right now, or donating to TGT so the girls can continue delivering content. And they really do work super, super hard. Like, you three dedicate yourselves to TGT, and I wish I had more time to do so. But you guys definitely work your butts off, several different shows a week. So you could definitely use the extra support. A lot of your shows benefit people. You have a lot of people watching you who have said that they have been personally encouraged and empowered by watching your programs. And I admire all of you ladies because you have been in activism, you have been engaged without funding. You didn't have a Patreon set up before this. You didn't have any way for people to donate to you directly, but Emma's been helping homeless people and helping them find housing for a long time. Many other activists in our community have. And I know the question has been raised. Cedars actually made a comment on this. Someone asked him if he was going to start a nonprofit, and he said no. And he said the reasons why he was not comfortable with doing that, mainly that money is a uncomfortable thing to handle. It causes difficulties and issues in your relationships. If you add money to any relationship, it's going to make it complicated. So he was like, who's going to hold the money? How do we know that they're going to do it properly? How do you know that when you give a charity your money, it's actually going to go to the person that needs it the most? So what we're trying to do is take some of the structures from good charities that we have seen and put it into what we're doing here. We're not a 501c3 certified charity. We're far from it. We don't have the funding for that. If we did, we would probably do something like that, all of us. But we do have the will, and where there's a will, there's a way. So we do have the ways to send funds to people, to send supplies. When the coronavirus pandemic first hit, we did a live, and a woman from, I think, Philadelphia sent toilet paper and supplies to a family with a child, diapers too, in Oregon, and was able to give them what they needed for the week because the husband lost his job and they were seriously at risk of contracting it. They actually ended up contracting it later, but she gave supplies, she shipped them over, and that was amazing. That was mutual aid. So all of us are interested in helping support. I guess the Glass Table has a Patreon. If you contact them, we can get those funds to the PIMOs. And one more thing is, people have been noticing lately that we have privacy agreements and stuff like that on some of the things that we do. Let me explain this really quick, if I may, ladies. This is to protect you as much as it is to protect us, and especially when we're working with PIMOs, who are people who are physically in the religion that they're in, but mentally out, right? So they're stuck in a situation where they cannot be themselves, they are oppressed, they can't live life the way they want to, or else they'll lose their family. Those are people in very serious crisis environments. A lot of them are in abusive situations. A lot of them are going through very serious traumatic experiences. So they contact us, they need support. We want to be able to help them. If you want to know where your money is going, I'm going to ask you personally to sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. So you can learn about where your money is going. You can know that it's going, or if you want it to go to something specifically, if you say, I'm going to donate money to the Glass Table, but I want it to go for this reason, cool. Because chances are we already have a line of people waiting for assistance that could use that money already. So if you want your money to be spent a certain way, or if you want to learn more about where your money is going, we're always happy to provide that with you. We just want to make sure that the people that we're helping are protected too. So that's the main reason why these things exist.
And I just want to piggyback off what you're saying, Chessa. It is important because when you think about PIMOs and the particular PIMO that I have in mind, his situation is pretty precarious.
Mhm.
And at some point, these people will transition into the ex-Jehovah Witness community if, in fact, that's what we tell them. And then you don't want them to be in a situation where you know all their business, or you spreading all their business around, or talking about them, or talking about their situation. How unfair would that be for them as a PIMO to not
Right.
even want to come into our community? And let's just keep it real. People do it. People do it. You start a GoFundMe. People got something to say about that. You do it. And there have been instances in our community where people have not been on the up and up and burnt, but you cannot allow that to make you feel like you're not going to help anybody because of it. You just have to be selective. You have to vet people. And that's some of the things that we try to do here. Like, we vet people as rigorously as we can. I mean, we don't know everybody's life and everything there is to know. But as far as it depends on us to know, or that we can know, we make it our business to know.
And
So,
I think the most uncomfortable parts of this process is vetting people, because people will just tell you what they're going through, and then you want to help them. So you start thinking of ways that you can, but you have to make sure that it's valid. So you're dealing with someone who's in an active trauma environment, who may be 2 days without a meal, or maybe recently abused, or going through a situation where they might be kicked out by their family that they're living with because they don't believe the same anymore. So you're dealing with people who are going through that, and you have to make sure that they're valid. You have to ask them very carefully, find ways to make sure that that is a real person going through a real situation, so that you can help them, because you don't want to go pay money to somebody who's just pretending, and then they take the money that somebody else rightfully deserves. There are plenty of people going through this situation right now that need assistance. So let's make sure that it's actually getting to where it needs to. We feel as passionate about that as you do.
So we're gonna first of all, we want to thank everybody for watching the stream. We're looking forward to all of your comments, your feedbacks, even your donations. If you, Chester's gonna give you some information on how you can actually do exactly that. Before we do that, I wanted to let you know that we do as TGT, and we call it TGT, but it's the glass table. It's our little acronym. Somebody asked me, "What is TGT?" It's the acronym for the glass table. You know, we had to make it a little hood, y'all. But I just thought that a little, hip or whatever. So I thought that it would be a good opportunity to mention that our merch, because you have an opportunity to not only donate, but get something back. And 100% of your purchases go to our activism and for streaming our platform, the costs of streaming our platform, which ain't cheap, y'all. Because as you can see, we try to do it very professional, our platform. And here's our one of our newer cups here with our characters on it.
Caricatures done by Draven Adams.
Sorry, Bella's going crazy, y'all. So I'm gonna put them.
You're good. So, so also, if you know of any fundraisers or charities that you have personally seen that have helped people or benefited people, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And another thing is, you're just looking to donate to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses for what they're going through, or you're wanting to find charities or people to work with, or if you're wanting to work with Black Lives Matter in your area, or you wanting to get with people who do protests on different things, we run into a lot of those people because of the things that we do. So we may have connections or resources that you can contact if you're interested in getting into activism or in getting into these protests or in helping these protesters. So feel free to hit us up. And again, everybody that's watching this is probably interested in activism in some way. So if you have seen a group that has done good work, feel free to leave them in the comments. Everybody in the comments who checks out those groups, make sure to vet those groups just to be safe. I saw the news article the other day where a far right white supremacist group made a Antifa Twitter as like a false misinformation thing. There's a lot of stuff like that out there right now. So I'm not saying to just throw your money at anything you see. What I'm saying is donate and devote to the causes that mean something to you. If you care about our community, if you care about the community around you, if you care about the oppression of people and you want to help but you're unable to physically be there or be able to donate your time the way you need to, donating is a great way to support the movements that you want to, so that we can make sure that we all continue to have the rights and civil liberties that we have right now, and they don't get thrown away over things like this. Nobody wants to live in a place where the police can just come in and do what they please with the people in any area. You don't want to live in a place where people are allowed to abuse you and you are not allowed to hold them accountable. You don't want to live with an authoritarian government. If you are a nationalist and you want to devote yourself to your nation, that's great. But I'm a patriot and I want to fight for human rights. So my patriotism and my humanism far over encompasses my nationalism. I will not stand up for anything that oppresses another person, ever. And Black Lives Matter is not oppressing you. Saying Black Lives Matter does not mean that your life doesn't matter. It doesn't take away from your dignity. It doesn't take away from your ability to feel pride in yourself. All it does is give that dignity to people of color who have been oppressed and say, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge what you're going through, and I want to stand beside you. And that's one of the best things that you could do for anybody in your life. And I really hope that more people support this movement so that we can continue fighting for civil rights. And I hope that the violence and the looting and the shameless deaths stop. You can't control what people are going to do, but I genuinely hope that things get better from here and that this leads to a positive, true, final change in our country and around the world. And to everybody that is risking their lives and protesting and using their voices out there today, please be safe. Please protect yourselves, and we're with you 100%. That's all I have to say. It's still on me. Are you girls still there?
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we will leave some of the foundations in the comments. Again, Reparations Roundtable. If you are in the area of Kentucky or Tennessee, they do great work for women of color and people of color around the area. So definitely check them out. Donate that to them because they're a fantastic organization that I personally trust.
All right. So you
Also, I didn't mention these. We're going to
Yes.
be doing glass table t-shirts. So I will get them up on Etsy soon, I promise.
I want one of those. That's my first time seeing it. That looks cool. You should put the face on the back.
Put the what on the back? Cut off then.
The faces.
The caricatures.
That would
Yeah.
be cute. You could get your glass table shirt custom made any way you like. So make sure you go on Etsy. We'll put the link below, and the way to find us, you'll want to put all one word, the glass table merch, right, Emma? And then if you want to reach out, Chester, you want people to reach out to you directly for if they want to donate?
Yeah, I mean, you can hit up our the Glass Table Facebook page, and that has a chat where people can communicate with directly the page that communicates with all of us. So if you want to know something specifically, if you have a question, if you have a comment, or if you want to yell at us, use that. I'll take the yelling ones. I threw that out there. And then if anybody wants to contact us personally, I have my site, www.useourvoice.org. I'm currently reforming it, but it has some of what I've done with my activism. And then you can find the other links to our channels and what we've done in our groups down in the description if you want to learn more about us.
Right.
But we pretty much all have somebody we know that needs help. So if you hit up any of us together or individually, we can point you in the right direction.
That's right. And also, 211 is your best friend. If you're a person in need, 211 is your best friend because they can definitely get you to the resources in your area, whether it's food, housing, job placement, pretty much filling out a resume. How do I know? Because I was a person that actually had to call 2111, and they gave me a lot of resources when I was in need. So 211, and that works, across the nation. So we're going to wrap up our stream. We want to thank you guys for joining us so much. And thank you guys in the comments. I'm sorry we couldn't get to a lot of your comments. Oh, somebody said the link is not correct. You think it's jwfacts.com.
Yeah, thank you.
What did I put? Oh, I put jwfacts.com. jw.facts.com. Oh, okay. So we're going to correct that, Susan. Thank you so much. See, this is why it's important that you guys participate with us. Because if you didn't, I would just be doing anything up here, y'all. Let's see here. So we will correct the link, guys. Don't look at what I put down. And you guys saw this flash across earlier. That was a mistake. We were working on something earlier. It's kind of an inside joke.
What was that? It
I
made
know.
me lose it.
Molly only lost it earlier. I'll tell you later.
My text banner that was.
Yeah, that was actually Emma's text banner. So thank you guys for joining us for a very serious and somber occasion, but also make sure that you check us out, like Chester said, individually. You'll see our streamer links below. And we thank you for joining us. Have a good one.
No point to that from back here.
Oh, yes. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Black Lives Matter.